What do you truly see when you look upon the frantic, chaotic theater of our modern world? As you turn on your screen, its cold blue light illuminating your face, what do you really perceive in the dizzying torrent of flashing headlines and dramatically edited video clips? Do you see mere characters dancing in a symphony of fear and anxiety, engineered to capture your attention for a fleeting few seconds? Do you hear mere words, sharp as daggers, hurled by politicians and diplomats on international forums, each syllable weighed and measured not for truth, but for advantage, to corner an opponent, to shape a narrative? Or do you see the chilling images of missiles, those man-made streaks of light that tear through the tranquil night, painting deadly arcs across the heavens before sowing destruction on sleeping cities, turning homes into tombs and dreams into dust? You might call it politics, a complex chess match between great powers. You might analyze it through the lens of economics, a war for resources and trade routes. You might label it a geopolitical conflict, an inevitable clash between nations with opposing histories and ideologies. And you would not be wrong. But what if I told you that all that your eyes see, your ears hear, and your mind analyzes is merely a play being performed on a visible stage? What if the actors you observe, the presidents in their tailored suits, the supreme leaders with their iron gazes, the generals in their medal-adorned uniforms are, in fact, merely reciting lines from a script written by forces they do not comprehend, manipulated by invisible strings they cannot feel? What if the real war, the war that will decide the fate of humanity, is raging fiercely, violently, on an invisible stage? Dare to look deeper for a moment, beyond the surface of events. Imagine that our reality is a colossal mirror, reflecting the material world. For years, that mirror seemed flawless, but now, cracks have begun to appear on its surface. At first, they were tiny, hairline fractures, easily dismissed as insignificant. But now, those cracks are widening, spreading like a spider's web, and through those fissures, another light, another reality, is leaking into our own. Through the cracks of the seemingly modern confrontation between Israel and Iran, we do not see a 21st century political dispute. Instead, we catch a glimpse of a war fought not for land, but for a sacred legacy. A war fought not for geopolitical power, but for a promise issued at the dawn of time. A spiritual war in which mighty nations with their armies and nuclear ambitions are but pawns on a cosmic chessboard, moved by unseen hands. This confrontation is not a new story written in the ink of our technological age. It is an ancient echo, a vibration from thousands of years ago, a melody played long ago that is now reverberating in our time with an ever-increasing thunderous intensity, like the approach of a great storm. It is a symphony composed by a divine conductor, and every historical event, every king, every prophet, every war, is but a single note in a grand and impossibly complex score. If you are willing to pull back the curtain of the material world, if you dare to silence the cacophony of the 24-hour news cycle to listen for the melody hidden beneath the noise of our age, then join me on this journey. Because the story you are about to hear does not begin in the assembly halls of the United Nations or with a treaty signed in Geneva. It begins with a whisper in the stillness of the desert, under a canopy of 1,000,000 stars. And its conclusion will not be decided by negotiators or superpowers, but by the arrival of a king who was foretold long, long ago. What you are about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about history, about politics, and about the battle for the soul of mankind. Prepare yourself, for the curtain on the invisible stage is about to rise. Every great symphony, no matter how complex or tragic, begins with a single note. Sometimes it is a deep, resonant, lingering note, signaling a theme that will return again and again, transforming and developing throughout the entire work. Our symphony, the symphony of the conflict of nations, begins with just such a note. It was not sounded in a grand palace or on a bloody battlefield. It was born in the sacred stillness of the Middle Eastern desert, under a cloudless night sky, within the broken and hopeful heart of an old man named Abraham. Abraham, a wealthy nomad from Ur of the Chaldeans, a city steeped in polytheistic worship, heard a melody that no one else could hear. It was the call of God himself, the Creator, the conductor of the universe. In a world bowing down to idols of wood and stone, gods made by human hands, God chose Abraham and called him out. He gave him a promise, a central melody of hope that would shape all of human history. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and to your offspring I will give this land. That promise, that melody, pure and powerful, was the foundation of the nation of Israel, a people born not of human will, but of a divine pronouncement. But even into the symphonies of heaven, the complexity and frailty of the human heart can introduce unexpected variations, discordant notes. The promise of an heir was given, but it did not arrive immediately. The years passed, and Abraham and his wife Sarah grew older. Doubt began to creep in. The pain of barrenness became a heavy burden, and in the impatience of their old age, they decided to help God, to try and fulfill his promise through their own efforts. Sarah, in her desperation, proposed a plan according to the customs of the time. She gave her Egyptian handmaiden, Hagar, to Abraham. From that union, Ishmael was born. Ishmael, a strong son, a wild donkey of a man, as the angel would later foretell. He was the result of human effort and human decision, an endeavor born of good intentions but a lack of faith. 13 long years later, when Abraham and Sarah were a century old, when all human hope had withered, the miracle happened. God intervened supernaturally to demonstrate that his promise did not depend on human ability. He fulfilled his original word. Sarah, the barren woman, gave birth to Isaac. Isaac, the son of laughter, the son of supernatural faith and waiting. His name means laughter, because Sarah had laughed in disbelief when she overheard that she would have a son. He was the chosen one, destined to carry the main melody of the covenant, the line through which the Messiah would come. Can you feel the tension simmering, almost boiling over, within Abraham's camp? This was not merely the jealousy between two women or the rivalry between two boys. This was a schism at the deepest spiritual level. Two sons, born of the same father, yet representing two entirely different principles. Isaac represented the grace of God, a gift that cannot be earned, a divine intervention into the natural order. Ishmael represented the effort of man, the flesh trying to accomplish the work of the Spirit, a religion based on works. God, in his infinite mercy, did not abandon Ishmael. He promised Abraham that he would also make Ishmael into a great nation, with 12 rulers, and that he would live in hostility toward all his brothers. But his melody was set on a different course. The division was inevitable. The conflict between Hagar and Sarah, between Ishmael and Isaac, became unbearable. Hagar and Ishmael departed into the wilderness of Paran. This was not a mere family tragedy. This was the first note of division being sounded in the symphony of history, a deep, lingering note, signaling a sacred dichotomy whose reverberations would echo through the centuries. The two lines, Isaac and Ishmael, Jew and Arab, were set on parallel paths that would sometimes cross with violent intensity. This spiritual fault line has run through the entire history of the Middle East, creating different geological layers of faith and culture, giving birth to great religions, and ultimately, laying the foundation for the conflicts we still witness to this day. That one note, played 4,000 years ago, has never truly faded away. As the symphony of history continued, the melodies originating from the line of Abraham through Isaac and Ishmael began to shape the heart of the Middle East. The melody of Isaac, the line of the covenant, became the central theme. The stories of the patriarchs, the exodus from Egypt, the giving of the law at Sinai, the judges, and the kings of Israel, like David and Solomon, became a continuous stream of covenant, faith, failure, and redemption. That melody was at times majestic, at times tragic, but always preserved by the hand of the divine conductor. But the conductor, in his infinite wisdom, knew that a great symphony requires more than a single melodic line. It needs a diversity of tones, a richness of instrumentation, and the power of contrast to make the main theme stand out. And so, while the drama of salvation was unfolding in Canaan, a new, powerful, and utterly unexpected instrument was being quietly prepared far away, almost on the edge of the known world. Far to the east, beyond the great Tigris and Euphrates rivers, across the formidable Zagros mountains, upon vast plateaus and fertile valleys, another people were rising. They were not descendants of Shem, the forefather of Abraham. They came from a different line, the line of Japheth, another of Noah's 3 sons. They were the Medes and the Persians, Indo-European tribes, valiant horsemen, and brilliant administrators. For centuries, they lived in the shadow of mightier Semitic empires like Assyria and Babylon. But like a rare lyre being meticulously crafted by a master luthier in his workshop, they were being shaped and honed, waiting for their moment to sound forth on the world stage. They were learning governance, organization, and warfare, preparing for a role they themselves did not know they were destined to play. And then that moment came. Like 2 streams converging into a great river, the Medes and Persians united, forming an unstoppable alliance. Under the leadership of brilliant kings, they swept across the Middle East like a storm, conquering Babylon and forging an empire that would shake the world. The Persian Empire, the first Aryan empire, stretched from the Indus River in the east to Libya and Egypt in the west, from the Caucasus Mountains in the north to the Persian Gulf in the south. Today, we call the heartland of that great empire Iran. Let us pause for a moment to contemplate the magnificent and artistic orchestration at play here. This was not a historical accident, a mere coincidence of conquests. While the melody of the covenant was being carried by the descendants of Abraham, an entirely different power, with a different genetic, cultural, and spiritual origin, was being quietly prepared on the periphery of the main stage. They were not children of the promise. They were not brothers of the covenant. They were a foreign element, a new timbre whose entrance would change the entire composition. They were a harp to Israel's lyre, a horn to their flute. Their arrival was like introducing a powerful percussion section into a quiet chamber piece. The rise of the Persian Empire was the deliberate introduction of a new instrument into the world's orchestra. Their arrival created a dramatic tension. Would this new instrument harmonize with God's melody, submitting to the divine conductor's direction, or would it create a jarring dissonance, trying to overpower the main theme? Would it become a tool of redemption, or a weapon of destruction? Both heaven and hell held their breath, waiting to see what tune this Persian instrument would play. Its entrance onto the world stage forever changed the dynamics of the region, and the complex, volatile relationship between them and the people of the promise, Israel, had begun. It would be a fateful dance of breathtaking harmony and deadly animosity, a dance that continues to this very day. The symphony had reached a mournful passage, a lament for a people seemingly abandoned. The melody of Israel had grown faint and weak, almost inaudible amidst the shouting of conquerors. Jerusalem, the city of the great King David, once their pride and spiritual center, had been leveled by the Babylonian army. Its strong walls were breached and torn down. The magnificent Temple of Solomon, where the very glory of God had once dwelt visibly between the cherubim on the mercy seat, was now a pile of ash and scorched rubble. The people of the promise, those who survived the slaughter, were bound in chains and dragged into exile, becoming slaves by the rivers of Babylon, forced to hang their harps on the willow trees and weep when they remembered Zion. Their hope flickered like a candle in a desert storm. The promise of an eternal kingdom, of a king on David's throne, seemed to have evaporated into thin air. The music of the covenant appeared to have reached a tragic, final end. In this context of utter despair, the Persian instrument, the new and powerful force on the world stage, was poised to play its first notes in relation to the people of Israel. After conquering Babylon, the entire world, and especially the Jewish exiles, held their breath. They assumed it would be a melody of conquest and oppression, a continuation of the brutal policies of the Assyrians and Babylonians. They had no reason to expect anything different, but the divine conductor, who directs the hearts of kings like a watercourse, had an entirely different plan, a masterful variation, an unexpected and beautiful note that no one could have predicted. He touched the heart of a pagan king, a man not of Abraham's line, the ruler of the Persian Empire. His name was Cyrus. And most miraculously, a testament to God's absolute sovereignty over history, over a century before Cyrus the Great was even born, before the Persian Empire was a formidable power, the prophet Isaiah had called him by name. Through Isaiah, God had declared, "Who says of Cyrus, 'He is my shepherd, and will accomplish all that I please.' He will say of Jerusalem, 'Let it be rebuilt,' and of the temple, 'Let its foundations be laid.' This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of to subdue nations before him." And Cyrus, an unwitting actor, played his part perfectly, as if reading his lines from an invisible script. After conquering Babylon, he did the unthinkable. In an act unprecedented in ancient history, Cyrus issued a formal decree, recorded both in the Bible and on archaeological artifacts like the Cyrus cylinder. That decree not only freed the people of Israel, but actively encouraged them to return to their homeland of Jerusalem. More than that, he commanded that all 5,000 gold and silver articles of the temple, which Nebuchadnezzar had plundered, be returned. He even decreed that the cost of rebuilding the house of their God would be paid from the Persian royal treasury. This was the melody of mercy, a pure, beautiful, and hopeful tune, played by the most unexpected of instruments. In a miraculous moment of history, Persia, a Gentile nation, became the rescuer, the patron, the hero in Israel's story of redemption. The actions of Cyrus were a powerful and undeniable testament to God's complete sovereignty over history. He can use anyone, any nation, whether of the covenant or outside of it, to accomplish his supreme and benevolent will. He is the conductor, and all nations are but instruments in his hands. This event planted in the Jewish people a deep respect and a fond memory of the Persians, a memory of kindness that would endure for generations. It set a precedent for peaceful coexistence and cooperation. But be warned, in every great symphony, a lyrical and gentle passage is often followed by one of drama and dissonance. The melody of mercy had been played, but would Persia forever play this tune of hope? Or was another conductor, one from the shadows with a different score, waiting for his chance to seize control of this powerful instrument and turn its melody into a song of destruction? The notes of hatred were being quietly written, waiting to be played. The melody of mercy, played by King Cyrus, still echoed, and under the patronage of the Persian Empire, a wave of Jewish exiles returned to begin the arduous task of rebuilding. They reconstructed the temple, though it lacked the glory of the first, and re-established their lives in Jerusalem. It seemed a new era of harmony and hope had dawned. But in the complex symphony of history, no harmony lasts forever. The silence of the enemy does not mean he has vanished. He is merely hiding, waiting for the opportune moment, a shift in the royal court, to introduce a rival theme, a jarring dissonance designed to shatter all order and silence the main melody. Years after the time of Cyrus, during the reign of King Xerxes, known as Ahasuerus in the Bible, within the same opulent Persian palace at Susa, a new, toxic, and hateful melody began to creep in and resound. It came not from an external enemy, but from the very heart of power. It came from a man named Haman, an Agagite, a descendant of King Agag, the ancient Amalekite enemy of Israel, whom King Saul had failed to destroy completely. Haman was an official honored by King Xerxes, and promoted to the highest position in the kingdom, second only to the king. All were required to kneel down and pay him honor. Haman's heart was filled with an ancient venom, a lethal combination of unbridled pride and generational hatred. His hatred was not directed at an individual, but at an entire people. When Mordecai, a Jew who served in the king's court, refused to bow down and kneel before Haman because his allegiance was to God alone, Haman's wounded pride erupted into a genocidal rage. He was not content to punish Mordecai alone. His hatred was total, absolute. He wanted to annihilate every Jew, every man, woman, and child throughout all 127 provinces of the vast Persian Empire, from India to Kush. This was the birth of the counter-melody of destruction, a carefully and cruelly calculated genocide, a brazen attempt to silence the melody of the covenant once and for all. Haman went before the king, slandering the Jewish people as a scattered yet distinct nation whose laws were different from those of every other people and who did not obey the king's laws, implying they were a threat to the stability of the empire. With cunning words and a massive bribe, 10,000 talents of silver, a staggering fortune, he convinced the king to issue an irrevocable decree. That decree, sealed with the king's own signet ring, set a date, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, to destroy, kill and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children on a single day, and to plunder their goods. The decree was dispatched throughout the empire. A shadow of death fell over the people of the promise. Their fate hung by a single thread. The counter-melody of Haman seemed triumphant, but the divine conductor is never taken by surprise. He neither slumbers nor sleeps. Even in this darkest of moments, he had already placed his own secret note into the score, an arrangement he had prepared years in advance. A note of hope, perfectly hidden for this exact moment. That note was a beautiful, orphaned Jewish girl named Hadassah, who had become the Queen of Persia and was known as Esther, urged on by her cousin Mordecai with the immortal words, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther resolved to act. With extraordinary courage, she risked her own life, violating court protocol by approaching the king uninvited, an act punishable by death. In 2 dramatic banquets she had prepared, she masterfully exposed Haman's wicked plot before the king. The king's fury turned from the Jews to Haman. The one who had sown the wind reaped the whirlwind. Haman was hanged on the very 75-foot gallows he had erected for Mordecai. The death sentence for the Jews was transformed into an epic song of deliverance. A new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves and destroy those who sought to attack them. God's people were saved. But pay close attention. Though Haman the man was dead, the seed of hatred he represented, that counter-melody, a spirit of genocide, anti-God and anti-his people, did not truly die. It was only temporarily defeated. It retreated into the shadows of history, waiting for another time, another context, another orchestra, to rise again with even greater fury. The story of Esther and Haman shows us a dramatic confrontation on the visible stage of the Persian palace. On one side, the courage, faith, and wisdom of Esther and Mordecai. On the other, the pride, genocidal hatred, and cunning plot of Haman. But to truly understand the deep roots of this conflict, we cannot look only at the human characters. We must dig deeper. We must ask a core question. Where did that counter-melody of destruction truly come from? Why did such an irrational, absolute and total hatred take root and flourish so powerfully in the land of Persia, in the heart of an empire that was once Israel's benefactor? Was it merely the personal animosity of one court official, or was something far more profound at work? To find the answer, we must pull back another curtain, one even thicker than the veil of politics and history. We must look to the invisible stage, the spiritual realm that exists parallel to and has profound influence over our physical world. And our guide into that world is a great prophet, a man who lived and served God at the very heart of the Babylonian and Persian empires, Daniel. Daniel's story, recorded in his book, provides a glimpse, a rare but crucial flash of light, into what is really happening behind the scenes of world history. Daniel recounts his own experience. After receiving a troubling vision of the future, he spent 3 full weeks, 21 days praying, fasting, and humbling himself before God. He ate no choice food, no meat or wine touched his lips, and he used no lotions at all. He was in a state of mourning and desperate seeking. His prayer was sincere and intense. Yet for 21 days there was silence. The heavens seemed as brass. Finally, on the 21st day, a glorious angelic being appeared to him. The angel's appearance was terrifying. His body was like topaz, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. This angel brought Daniel's answer, but he also revealed the reason for the delay. The angel's words unveil a spiritual battle on a level we can barely comprehend. He said to Daniel, "Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you. Since the first day that you set your heart to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Stop and absorb the earth-shattering significance of that statement. The prince of the Persian kingdom. This was not King Cyrus or King Xerxes. This was not a human prince. This was a spiritual entity, a high-ranking demonic power in Satan's hierarchy, a prince from the kingdom of darkness assigned to rule, control, and influence the physical territory of Persia. This entity, this prince, was powerful enough to fight and withstand a mighty angel of God for 3 weeks, until the archangel Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help him. This is the echo in the unseen realm. It shows us that behind every visible nation, empire, and territory on earth, there is a corresponding power structure in the spiritual world. The real battle is not between diplomats or armies, but between the angels of God and the princes of darkness. The same demonic spirit that whispered genocidal hatred into the ear of Haman and the spirit that resisted the prayers of Daniel are one and the same. It is a territorial ruling spirit, an ancient hatred attached to the land itself. It can be temporarily pushed back by righteous acts like those of King Cyrus, or exposed by courage like Queen Esther's, but it is never completely destroyed. It merely lies in wait, seeking empty and willing human hearts to host its hatred, to once again possess and direct the Persian instrument for its own dark purposes. It was waiting for a new orchestra. Long centuries passed since the time of Daniel and Esther. The great Persian Empire fell to the Macedonian phalanxes of Alexander the Great. Other empires rose and fell upon that same land, the Seleucids, the Parthians, the Sassanids, followed by the Arab, Turkish, and Mongol Islamic dynasties. The land of Persia changed its name, its language, its religion from Zoroastrianism to Islam, and its rulers countless times. Its melody went through innumerable variations, sometimes lyrical, sometimes chaotic. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia, the spiritual entity ruling that land, did not disappear. It does not die with empires. It only adapts. Like a dark conductor who had lost his orchestra, it waited patiently for the perfect opportunity, the ideal political and religious environment, to once again step onto the podium and strike up the counter-melody of destruction, this time with a new intensity and sophistication. It was waiting for an ideology that would resonate perfectly with its own ancient hatred. And in 1979, that perfect opportunity arrived. The world witnessed an event that shook the entire geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and the globe, the Islamic Revolution in Iran. The secular monarch, the Shah of Iran, a close ally of the United States and the West, who had maintained a pragmatic and relatively peaceful relationship with the young state of Israel, was overthrown. An entire social structure that was rapidly westernizing was thrown into reverse. In place of the monarchy rose something entirely new, an experiment unprecedented in modern history. A Shiite Islamic theocracy, led by an austere, exiled cleric named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. From the very first days of the revolution, as ecstatic crowds flooded the streets, the world heard a chillingly familiar sound. This was not just a political change. It was the resurrection of an ancient, uncompromising ideology. From the loudspeakers in the streets of Tehran, in the sermons, in the mosques, and in the speeches of the new leaders, one primary slogan rang out, undisguised and unambiguous, becoming a core part of the revolution's identity. Mag bar Israel, death to Israel. It was chanted alongside its twin, Mag bar America, death to America. This was the moment when the counter-melody returns. The spirit of Haman, the hateful entity that had whispered into the ear of the ancient Persian vizier, had now found a new orchestra, a more perfect and devoted orchestra than ever before. This time, it was not just one official in a palace plotting in the shadows. This time, it was the entire official ideology of a nation of 70 million people, propagated through its mosques, its schools, and its state-run media. It was written into their constitution. The words of successive Iranian leaders, from Khomeini to Khamenei, about wiping Israel off the map, about the Jewish state being a cancerous tumor that must be removed, are not mere political hyperbole. They are not negotiating tactics to gain leverage. They are the direct, almost verbatim echoes of the ancient plot recorded in the book of Esther. The counter-melody of destruction had been cloaked in new religious garb, a martyr ideology, and amplified by the technology of the 20th and 21st centuries. Ballistic missiles, a nuclear program, cyber warfare, and sophisticated proxy forces. The war in the shadows, the battle Daniel witnessed between the angel and the prince of Persia, had now stepped into the light more clearly than ever before. Through its proxy forces like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and other militias in Syria and Iraq, Iran began an undeclared but vicious war against Israel. It funded terror, supplied weapons, trained fighters, and propagated an ideology of uncompromising hatred. The Persian instrument, which once played a melody of mercy under King Cyrus, was now, under the control of a different conductor, playing a death march, pushing the entire region to the brink of an all-out war. The symphony is now rushing towards its final thunderous crescendo, a fortissimo passage filled with storm and fury. The melodies and counter-melodies have been played and replayed over the centuries, but now the tempo is accelerating dramatically, relentlessly. The tension in the air is almost physically palpable, like the ominous stillness before a great hurricane when the barometric pressure drops and the sky darkens. The individual instruments, the nations on the world's chessboard, are beginning to move, not randomly or chaotically, but as if being summoned by an invisible command from the conductor to take their final positions on the stage. The last notes of a turbulent chapter of history are being arranged, preparing for a final confrontation. To understand the profound significance of what is unfolding, we cannot rely solely on political analysis or intelligence reports. We must once again turn to the ancient scores, to the prophecies written thousands of years ago with astonishing accuracy. The prophet Ezekiel, a contemporary of Daniel who also lived in exile in Babylon, was given a terrifying and incredibly detailed vision by God. In chapters 38 and 39 of his book, Ezekiel describes a scene that will take place in the latter years. A massive military coalition will form, coming down from the far north to attack the people of Israel, who have been gathered back to their homeland after centuries of dispersion, a people living in relative security, a land of unwalled villages, living in safety, all of them without walls and without gates or bars. The leader of this demonic alliance is a mysterious figure named Gog, from the land of Magog, the chief prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. Many reputable Bible scholars have identified these lands with the region of modern-day Russia and its southern neighbors. But Gog does not act alone. The prophecy explicitly lists the other members of his orchestra, the nations that will join in this invasion. And who is named, unmistakably, right alongside Gog's closest allies? Persia, modern-day Iran. The prophecy reads, Persia, Cush and Put will be with them, all with shields and helmets, also Gomer with all its troops, and Beth Togarmah from the far north with all its troops, the many nations with you. Ezekiel 38,5. This is no longer speculation, this is no longer vague interpretation. This is the orchestra of judgment gathering before our very eyes, in our daily news feeds. Look at the headlines. The very nations named in Ezekiel's prophecy are forming unprecedented strategic, economic, and military alliances. Russia, Rosh, is increasingly cementing its role as a dominant power in the Middle East. And who is its closest ally in the region? Iran, Persia. They share military technology, cooperate economically, and coordinate foreign policy. Along with them are Turkey, Togarmah, a NATO member that is increasingly drifting away from the West and into the Russo-Iranian orbit, and other nations in North Africa like Libya and Sudan, believed to correspond to Cush and Put. The counter-melody of destruction, nurtured by the spirit of Haman and amplified by the Iranian theocracy, is now calling other instruments to join it. The goal of this alliance, as Ezekiel described, is ostensibly to plunder and seize loot, to capture Israel's prosperity. But its deeper spiritual goal is to finish the work that Haman started, to wipe the people of the promise from the face of the earth. This is the final, greatest attempt of that ancient, hateful spirit, played out on an international scale. The entire world is looking toward the Middle East. Political analysts are baffled by the realignment of alliances. Economists worry about the instability. But those with eyes to see and ears to hear recognize that this is not ordinary politics. This is prophecy being fulfilled with chilling accuracy. The actors are taking their places. The stage is being set. The orchestra of Gog is tuning its instruments, preparing for the final symphony of judgment. The storm that Ezekiel saw 2,500 years ago is forming on the horizon, and it is heading straight for the hills of Israel. The orchestra of judgment is fully assembled. Under the command of Gog, the mighty coalition from the north, with Persia as a key member, descends like a storm cloud covering the land, a tsunami of men and steel. Their goal is clear: to attack a seemingly unprotected Israel, to destroy, to plunder, and to silence the melody of the covenant forever. The world holds its breath. Other nations stand by, some helpless, some in silent complicity. It seems no power on earth, no army, no alliance, no technology can stop this terrifying invasion. Jerusalem is surrounded. All human hope appears to be extinguished. The counter-melody of destruction is about to play its final note, a triumphant, deafening chord of chaos and death. But it is at that very moment, at the peak of darkness and despair, when humanity has nowhere left to turn, that a cataclysmic event, transcending all physical laws and all human understanding, will occur. The heavens will be silent no more. The veil separating the visible and invisible realms will be torn from top to bottom, and the divine conductor will appear. This will not be a silent arrival like his first coming, born as a helpless baby in a Bethlehem manger, veiled in human flesh. This time, he will return, just as the angels promised the stunned disciples on the Mount of Olives. This same Jesus, who has been taken from you into heaven, will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. The prophet Zechariah described this moment with vivid, earth-shaking detail. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two. The very place from which he ascended will be the place of his royal return. But this time he returns not to suffer, but to reign. He carries not an olive branch of fragile man-made peace, but a sharp sword proceeding from his mouth with which to strike the nations. His eyes are like a flame of fire. On his head are many crowns, symbolizing his absolute authority over all kingdoms. And on his robe and on his thigh, a name is written that none can dispute: King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He is the Lord Jesus Christ, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, the Word of God made manifest, now returning in unveiled glory and power. At his appearance, the entire symphony of human history will reach its glorious and terrifying climax. The invasion of Gog and his hordes will be stopped not by tanks or fighter jets, but by the sheer, overwhelming presence of the returning king. Ezekiel prophesied that God would intervene supernaturally to defend his people and make his name known. With a great earthquake, with infighting among the enemy ranks, with pestilence, with hailstones and burning sulfur. But Zechariah goes even further, describing how the very presence of the Lord will cause his enemies to be consumed. The counter-melody of hatred, of destruction, of the spirit of Haman and the prince of Persia will be silenced instantly and forever. Not by a protracted war, but by a single word from the conductor himself. Every scheme of darkness, every ounce of human pride, every rebellion against God will dissolve before his blinding glory like mist before the rising sun. The conflict between Israel and Iran, the echo of the division between Isaac and Ishmael, the melody of Cyrus's mercy, and the counter-melody of Haman's destruction, it will all come to its final end. Not with a man-made peace treaty, but with an unalterable decree from the throne of the universe. Every knee will bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. The final movement has arrived, and the conductor has returned to end it with a chord of absolute power, justice, and perfect glory. The grand symphony of the ages is drawing to its close. The music has swelled to its final breathtaking crescendo. The stage is being cleared for the last and most glorious act. The script was written by the prophets thousands of years ago with stunningly precise detail. The main actors, the nations and the unseen forces behind them have taken their places. The final outcome has been determined by the one who wrote the story from before the foundation of the world. The victory of the divine conductor, the Lord Jesus Christ, is certain. The establishment of his kingdom of righteousness and peace is unshakable. But amid the certainty of prophecy and the grandeur of cosmic events, there remains one final question. A question not for nations or for leaders. An intensely personal and urgent question directed to every single soul listening to this story. It is the question for you: what is your note? In this grand symphony, you are not a spectator in a distant seat. You are a musician in the orchestra. Every day, with your life, your thoughts, your words, and your actions, you are playing a note. When you see the world shaking, when nations rage and alliances form just as the scriptures foretold, what melody will you choose to play? As the news of war, conflict, and hatred floods your screens, will you allow your heart to be filled with the melody of fear and panic? That melody is jarring, chaotic, and without hope. Or will you choose to harmonize with a different tune? A melody of unshakable faith, a peace that surpasses all understanding, rooted in absolute trust in the conductor who holds the entire world in his hands. The biblical call to pray for the peace of Jerusalem is not a political suggestion or an empty slogan. It is a sacred invitation for you to participate actively in God's symphony. Every prayer you offer in faith, through the name of Jesus, is a note of resistance against the powers of darkness. Every time you pray for God's protection over the nation of Israel, for a spiritual awakening for the people of Iran, that they might be freed from the spirit of hatred that rules them, for the salvation of souls on both sides of the conflict, You are playing a melody of hope and redemption. Your prayer is a weapon in the spiritual war, a declaration that you stand with the conductor and his plan, not with the chaos of the world. Do not be a passive spectator in this great and true story. Do not sit in the grandstands and simply watch events unfold with curiosity or fear. The conductor is inviting you to be a participant. Be a watchman on the wall, as the prophet Isaiah said, one who gives the Lord no rest day or night, reminding him of his promises until he establishes Jerusalem and makes her the praise of the earth. Be a trumpeter, sounding the alarm to those around you about what is to come and pointing them to the only path of safety, which is through faith in Jesus Christ. Be one whose faith does not waver, like Abraham, believing in what is not seen and having it credited as righteousness. Because when the conductor returns, in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, he will be looking for those who were ready. He will be looking for those with oil in their lamps, whose hearts were watching and waiting. He will be looking for those who were listening for and harmonizing with his melody, even while the world around them played the frantic music of rebellion. The war is real. The hatred is real. The prophecies being fulfilled are real. But the victory of King Jesus is even more real. And the King is coming. Listen, can you hear his footfalls? Be ready. And choose your note wisely, for it will echo into eternity. The music swells to a final, majestic crescendo, a blend of glory, power, and awe, before slowly resolving into a single chord of peace, eternity, and perfect resolution.